First of all, welcome to all of you. Thank you for attending the second of our two webinars that we've arranged to really talk about how you can get started with regard to CanReview. We're ready to go now, and we're so appreciative of all of you for being interested in CanReview and coming out for this session. So I have a number of slides that I'll be going through. By the way, I'm Susan Marlin, the lead investigator on the CanReview project. And I'll be going through some slides. And after I finish the slides, really happy to take your questions. We'll ask you to post them in the Q&A section on the site. And Elise Johnson, our communications lead, she'll be coming in to moderate the questions and send them along to me. So again, thank you for being here. And please do post your questions when you're ready with them. So we're talking about CanReview today, Canada's single research ethics review system. So on to the next slide, please. So the vision for CanReview is to have this single high-quality research ethics review for multi-site clinical trials and health studies conducted across Canada. The CanReview team came together to submit an application to an RFP, a request for proposals, that was offered by the ACT, the Accelerating Clinical Trials Consortium, and this group was successful in terms of that process. And we started working on this about a year ago, getting everything together, and now we're ready to really launch and accept institutions and sites. And that's really what this is about. Today is how we get started, but just a few of the basics. Of course, why are we doing this? To improve ethics reviews efficiencies for multi-site studies. So in other words, to help our startup times, which will help Canada become more competitive in terms of attracting global clinical trials. We're also hopeful that through CanReview, we will have the opportunity to expand participation in clinical trials to what have traditionally been underserved communities. So on to the next slide, please. So in terms of what will change with CanReview, studies that go through CanReview will have a single pan-Canadian or a single review that can apply to any sites that have joined in Canada. There's one system that will be used for these ethics review, and that is the STREAM system, which is supported by help desk and many individuals that support the platform that work with us at CanReview. CanReview will have a distinct Canada-wide fee structure for industry-sponsored studies, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. And the system itself is bilingual, and we will have supports available, folks at CanReview that are bilingual as well, both English and French. What will be the same as always, many of you probably work with REBs or submit to REBs that, local studies or studies that might be multiple site, but for whatever reason, go through your local REBs, and that will not change. The studies that come through CanReview, they will come through CanReview, and many will continue to not go through CanReview, especially single site studies. So that will be the same as always. The other point we like to emphasize is that CanReview is really just for ethics review. We understand that there are other requirements that are in place for study teams that are starting clinical trials or other studies within institutions. All those other requirements of your institutions will remain the same. What essentially is happening is the ethics review is being done outside the local or institutional board. So on to the next slide, please. So one of the key things about CanReview is that there are timelines that are associated with the reviews. We had a countrywide tactical team that helped us work on this. It was our timelines and transparency group. And they went through things in a very practical way, what is reasonable to expect. And you can see the timelines outlined here. So when an REB is offered this study to review it, they have 2 business days to accept that review. From the time they accept it, there's a 28 business day window from the time of acceptance until the feedback, the initial feedback after the full board meeting needs to get back to the research team or the lead investigators. And the research team or lead investigator has 5 days to respond back to the board, and each feedback loop has to be done in 5 days. That's for the countrywide approval of the protocol, the template consent form, the IB, etc., whatever goes along with that protocol. When it comes to activating individual sites, when those applications come through to join that countrywide ethics approval, the board of record, which reviewed the countrywide study, they have 5 business days to get the feedback to the investigator with regard to that request for review and to be added to the study. The investigator has 2 days to respond to them, and it's 2 days for each of the parties going back and forth until the approval is done. One of the things that I want to emphasize here is that a lot of the gain that we're expecting in terms of timeliness is really around the investigators and the research teams having very defined and strict timelines around how much time they have to get back to the boards. We know our boards, when they receive a study, in most cases it goes on to the agenda, it goes to the next REB meeting, and that feedback is back to investigators almost always within a week or less. So we have a lot of confidence that this same process can be met, will be met by our REBs. Again, where we see a huge opportunity is really having that expectation and that requirement for the study teams and the sponsors supporting them to get back to the REB promptly. That's where we think one of the great advantages will be. Now, in terms of studies that can come through CanReview, it's any multi-site clinical trial or health study that's being done in 2 or more sites from 2 or more provinces. So on to the next slide, please. This diagram here shows the process. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, what you see there is what we're calling the Canada-wide PI. This might be the nominated principal applicant on a CIHR project, or it might be a PI that the sponsor has chosen for a multi-site study. This individual will submit the application through Stream. By the way, I should emphasize that industry, for example, sponsors, they can draft that application should they choose to, if it's a sponsored study, but a PI will need to sign off before it's submitted to the system. But the application comes through Stream. It will be sent to one of our validated REBs in the system. They have those 2 days to accept or reject that application. If that REB doesn't accept it, it will go to another one. But if they do accept it, they have 28 days to send the feedback to the PI, and that allows enough time. This is business days for the full board meeting to occur and the questions to be collated and sent back. Once the countrywide approval is final, the study is approved to go forward, then you look at the bottom row and you see the bubbles in red. So those are the local PIs or sites. And the PI from the local site will apply essentially through the same system, which is the Stream system, to have a review done by that same board of record. And that review just looks at local issues. So who the PI is, who the coordinators are, where they're going to store their records, if they have any local conflicts of interest. So it's an abbreviated application just about local issues. Once the board of record has approved that, then the site can join the study. Now, these REB approvals of sites, they're typically, in many or most cases, we see them, or at least half of cases, we expect that they'll be done in a week or less. And that's really where you get the advantage of these single reviews. So on to the next slide, please. So the REB assignment process, how does CanReview pick the REB that will be the board of record for any study? This was determined by one of our cross-Canada tactical teams. Actually, I think 2 of the tactical teams, which included sponsors, which included REB members, which included people from institutions. We had patient reps. They looked at how should the studies be assigned. I won't go into this in too much detail, but on the left, you see investigator-initiated studies. With those, essentially, for the most part, is going to go to the REB of the applicant. So the home REB of the applicant, there's some variation around that you can look at, but that's how it will be done as long as their REB is participating in the CanReview model. If not, it'll be assigned to an REB, ideally an REB of one of the participating sites. So that's for investigator initiated. With industry funded studies, as we all know, funding comes along with industry funded studies for ethics review. And we'd like to ensure, the funding that comes with that is distributed as broadly as possible across the REBs participating. So when an industry funded study comes through, we will assign it or offer it to basically the next board on the list in a sequence. So Board A does the last industry funded study. The next one that comes through will go to Board B. If Board B is unable to take and do that studies within the timelines required or doesn't have the expertise to do it, they can definitely turn down that study, and then we'll offer it to Board C. Then the next industry funded study that comes in, we would offer it to Board B that missed the last one for whatever reason. So it's basically a next in sequence assignment. And again, it's to make sure that all of the boards in the CanReview system have the opportunity to generate those REB fees for review. So on to the next slide first, please. So one of the important things, we've talked a lot about timelines, talked a little bit about money, but one of the most important things about CanReview is our focus on high quality reviews. We've had a lot of questions about what if there are particular provincial requirements, for example, in legislation. So as sites come on from different jurisdictions, we'll be collecting everything about that jurisdiction in terms of legislation and making sure the REB of record is empowered with that information so that the review that they do considers those requirements that may be different by provinces. By the way, largely privacy legislation is not all that different across the country, but there are differences and they will be respected. All of the timelines that we suggested on that prior slide, again, these were developed with that Cross Canada tactical team, and they were really, I would say, arrived at from a practical standpoint for the REBs and the reviews. What are they doing? What are they able to do already that works well? I keep talking about the investigators, kind of more emphasis is on them to respond in a timely way to the boards. The other thing that we're really excited about is really building a community of practice of REBs across Canada. So once REBs are in the mix, we'll be holding meetings and other activities that allow folks to share information, harmonize policies, processes, etc. So across all of the boards, there is that cross learning and improvements in quality reviews. The other key thing about CanReview that REBs can decline studies if they don't have the time to meet the timeline. So if there's not the time, they can turn it down. They don't lose their place in rotation. They can come back for the next one when they have time. The other really important quality measure that we have is the stop the clock concept, so that on a case-by-case basis where the review of a study is complicated or it's complication for the REB or the investigators are struggling with, getting quality responses back to the board, we will stop the clock so that the days just don't keep building up. So all of these things are really meant to ensure that we have the board of record, the one REB that's doing the review that has been validated through strong measures. That REB will do a single high quality review. And ideally, the other boards that don't have to do that review have more time to do their own reviews and as well contribute to quality in that way. So on to the next slide, please. So I mentioned we talk about fees. When you look at this slide here, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the fees that will be charged to a study sponsored for industry-sponsored studies. So it's $5,100 per research site, so not per study, per research site for the first 5 sites. And then if you look down, in that far left column to the second group, like studies, or, for the first 5 sites is $5,100 each. After that, it reduces to $4,100 each. Anyway, this is the fee schedule we came up with. Again, it was a cross-country tactical team, including our sponsors, including our REBs, our institutions, patient reps, etc., that looked at the issue. What should the fees be? By the way, some of these fees, I don't think they're the highest in the country, but they're higher than some, but it's really in recognition of the fact that we have defined timelines for CanReview, and you're going to get that high quality, dependable review within a reasonable time period. So when you look at the third column, that's the amount of money that's going to the REB of record for the study. So if there are 2 sites, it's $7,500. If there are 3, $8,250, etc. If you look at the 4th column, that is the total amount of money that will be distributed to participating sites on that study that have REBs that are reviewing within the CanReview system. So what this means is if you are not the board of record for a study, but you have a board of record in the CanReview model, every time one of your sites participates on a CanReview study, $1,000 in funding will be coming to your board, to your institution, to help compensate for some of the direct fees that don't come. You can see in the most right column there, those are the fees that are retained by CanReview to help support continual operation of the system. So can we move to the next slide, please? We were asked to consider a reduced fee schedule for Canadian biotechs, which we were really happy to do. The Cross Canada Tactical Team considered the question and came up with this revised fee schedule here. You can see upper left-hand column, $47.50 per research site instead of the $5,100 that established companies or pharma are charged, medtech, etc. So you can see the same schedule here, what it costs. So in this fee schedule, what you see is the price to the biotechs is cheap. It's lower than what it is for the other companies, but the REB of record fee schedule stays the same. The REBs are being paid the same. The participating sites with REBs in the mix are being paid the same, and CanReview is receiving less fees. But we think this is an incredibly important thing to do to help support a biotech. So on to the next slide, please. So we're really getting into the nuts and bolts of readiness now. Those are kind of, we've gotten by some of the basic details that we wanted to share about CanReview. So really, we're going to go through these in a little bit of detail, but essentially to become a participating organization, your institution or organization needs to sign the CanReview participation agreement. You need to review any internal process or policies which might need to be amended to accept the review of REBs outside of your institution, or for your REB to review studies on behalf of external institutions. There's an ethics and admin profile to complete, and of course, communicating about CanReview with your community. So on to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit more about the CanReview agreement. This is an agreement that was proposed by our Cross Canada Tactical Team. They got together, talked about it a lot, and then we came up with an agreement that really consists of 2 parts. Part 1 is the CanReview Interinstitutional Agreement, which governs how organizations delegate ethics oversight to a board outside of their institution. So this is really the meat of what we're doing here, right? Separating that ethics approval from internal institutional ethics boards, as not in many cases, but in some cases, or I guess, many, this is the way it has been done. So it allows us to have, and by the way, external delegation to boards outside has been happening for years, so that this isn't a new thing. Having agreements covered is not a new thing. The Tri-Council has required this for beyond minimal risk studies for years, for all studies for years, but still maintains that for beyond minimal risk studies, which our clinical trials are. So I mentioned that the Cross Canada Tactical Team drafted this agreement. It went out broadly across our community. We are so grateful to all of the institutions that downloaded it and made comments and asked really good questions. The agreement has been amended based on all of that feedback and substantially improved, in our opinion. But now it's final and it's out there. It can't be negotiated, the language, essentially because it's between all of the participating institutions. So once it's signed by one, it can't be negotiated. Indeed, it has been signed by one already. So by the way, over time, we absolutely expect that agreement will evolve and change. So when you're looking at it, even if every word and every clause isn't exactly the way you or your legal counsel might like to see it, For one, I would assure them that, very detailed process was undertaken to get there, that this agreement is nothing new in terms of concepts. It's been based on delegation processes and expectations that have been going on for years, but you should be keeping track of things. It'd be nice if this could change at some point in time, and we will have it open up from time to time and improve it as we have improvements that make sense to the agreement. So the first part is that IIA, and the second part of the agreement is just a terms of service for Stream, and that's the system. That's the online ethics review management system. It's based on the Infonetica system that will be running countrywide to accept all the applications, to forward them on to the REBs, to collect all of the information that's going to the investigators submitting to all the participating organizations or sites, I should say, across the country. So this is the terms of service, which gives institutions and their folks access to the system. And it's signed between each of your participating organizations and Clinical Trials Ontario, because Clinical Trials Ontario runs the system and holds the contract with Infonetica for the system. So when it comes to this agreement, the IIA, the CanReview IIA, and the terms of service, you can sign up in 3 different ways. You can sign up as an institution that will just be recruiting, so joining studies already approved in CanReview. You can join just as an REB host institution, so your organization hosts an REB that is willing to be validated or has been validated and will be reviewing studies in CanReview, or your organization joins us both. And we hope to have all 3 of these and many of the third that come forward. The signing process is simple. You download the agreement. It's on the CanReview website. Once it's signed on your end, send it to CanReview at info@canreview.ca. We will sign it here and send back a fully executed copy of the agreement. And then you are a participating organization. We will be placing your name on the website. We will be bragging about all of the work that you've even done to get to this point, which we'll be incredibly happy about. And then you're off to the races. You can participate in CanReview in the way that you've designated in the agreement. So on to the next slide, please. So that's the agreement part. Now, in terms of policies and procedural, things that you might want to be thinking about are things like, we often get questions, what about local review, local REB review? The expectation is there will be, in most cases, no local REB review. When it's approved through CanReview, that would be all you would be expected to do as an investigator to have appropriate approval of that study. With that being said, we do have provinces that have legislative or government mandated barriers around accepting extraprovincial reviews, and we will be working with those provinces to develop mechanisms that can work there as well. So there might have to be some, in fact, not might, there absolutely will have to be within province reviews in some of these cases, and we will work to facilitate that. So that's something to think about. The other point that we'd like to emphasize, and I said this earlier, but all of your institutional requirements around contracts, budgets, feasibility, et cetera, those all remain in place. CanReview is just the external research ethics review, so that REB and that REB review process is separated from the institution itself in this model. And again, that's not a new thing. That has been happening in Canada for years. It's happening in jurisdictions all around the world where the ethics review is done in a high quality, focused way and applies within institutions across different jurisdictions. So when you're looking at implementing things internally, you might need to look at your REB delegation policies, the internal systems you have in place, like most places have institution-wide research admin systems or enterprise systems. You would need to look at how you would deal with that. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but whatever help you need from us, please let us know. We're happy to meet with your senior leadership. We're happy to, give you the support that you need from our help desk and central navigator, et cetera, not just when you're starting to submit studies, but when you're getting ready to adopt CanReview, we can provide lots of help in that regard. And one of the things that we would say is that we can absolutely connect you to with other organizations and institutions that have joined, and they can often share best practices that can help you along the way. So on to the next slide first, or next slide. So we mentioned this institutional ethics and administration profile. In Ontario, something similar, the same as existed for years, called the DIER, Documented Institutional Ethics Requirement. This is a two-part form. There's an ethics component where we, when you're coming on board, we need you to list any specific or extraordinary ethics requirements that are particular to your institution. These are not meant to be preferences of your REB or, just things that would be nice to have. These are meant to be documented institutional policies that change something in the ethics review process, because you have to have it for your institution. So this is your opportunity to identify those, and then we make sure they're always supported by the board of record that gets copies of these, and they're kept on file during our screening process as well. A good example might be for this provincial specific privacy requirements, maybe around the age of consent, maybe other things. So you get the chance to identify those. There's also an administrative component to this form where you can identify the primary and secondary institution representatives for your institution. So these are the main contacts for CanReview studies. So when a researcher at your institution applies to be the countrywide applicant, you get notification of that. When a PI at your institution applies to join a study that's already been approved within CanReview, you get not only notification of that, but you have the opportunity to agree or not agree that they can join that ethics review. And part of that agreement, that IIA, really is kind of, there's an appendix in there that shows that delegation agreement, and you have to click in the system as this contact to enact that delegation agreement. But these folks, they're different, can be different at different places. Examples of people who serve as either the primary or secondary and have those responsibilities to sign off. It's often an institutional research administrator. In some places, we expect it might be a senior ethics administrator, but it's up to you, up to your institution to decide who those folks will be. These folks have full viewing access to any information from your organization. So again, if you have a PI joining a study already approved, you have full access to see everything about what's been done in the ethics review of that study. To look at, and as things come through in the study, adverse events, amendments, etc., again, should you choose to monitor and see what's happening, you can absolutely see what's happening there. So on to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about REB readiness. If your institution is looking at joining CanReview as an REB host institution, this was a decision made by a cross-Canada tactical team looking at REB validation. What would be sufficient mechanisms for REBs to be validated so that institutions across the country could trust that they would be receiving high quality, regulatory compliant, policy compliant, etc., research ethics reviews. And there were 3 validation pathways that were identified by this cross-Canada tactical team. One is the CHEER, which is the Child Health Ethics Review Program, the CHEER REB Assessment Program. It's qualified 2 boards in Canada. That would be an acceptable mechanism. So the 2 boards that have already qualified that way will be grandmothered into the system. There's the CTO REB qualification program that has qualified over 20 boards. Any boards already qualified by a CTO would also be grandmothered into the system. And the HRA Canada, Human Research Accreditation Canada, this organization has qualified 2 boards in Canada, including Horizon Health REB in New Brunswick, and again, grandfathered in, ready to go. So these all have active, what we're calling as a general word, validation here. In the CTO and the chair REB assessment process, the focus was on the REBs. It wasn't an institution-wide accreditation. The focus was on the REBs. And we looked at the requirements to do that, compared them with the requirements for HARC in terms of, what's, reviewed in terms of boards. And this, we had experts from each of or people who've gone through these experiences or run these experiences from each of these come and explain to that cross-Canada team the different processes, and we had a very clear analysis done of the requirements of each, and the cross-Canada team deemed them to be substantively similar, so you can use either of these ways. Will there be other ways in future that will give across the system institutions, etc., confidence? And that all of the REBs are working at the same level or similar levels of quality and resourcing and compliance. We don't know. Phase 1 of CanReview, this is where we've gotten to support these 3 mechanisms. So what this means effectively is, as CanReview is starting, I think we probably have just right off the bat up to 23 boards that could be ready to go grandmother date. So that's terrific. So if any boards are out there and you're thinking about coming forward for to participate in CanReview, for one, I'm sure HRAC Canada would be really glad to hear from you if you choose to go through that human research accreditation path. HRRC goes beyond the ethics board and, into the institution when it comes to human subjects. And that's a really great choice for many institutions. If you're interested in just the REB part, that can be accomplished through the CTO qualification program. But whatever you're doing, if we can help in any way, please let us know. And if you're gearing up for it, thinking about it, we'd love to know that so that we can be planning on your board joining at some point in time. So on to the next slide, please. So in terms of your researchers getting ready, again, having the understanding that the study has a minimum of 2 sites from 2 or more provinces, that's really important. Of course, that it's health related, a clinical trial or health related observational study is really important. And they can submit a study-wide, country-wide initial application, and then sites across the country can join. If your investigators are interested in this and your institution needs a little poke to get going things, there is a letter that we have, a template letter that any researchers or others can use to send to senior leadership and hopefully get their support with your institution getting ready to get on board with CanReview. So on to the next slide, please. So, with the STREAM program, I mean, it is an external system. It's not difficult to use, but, there needs to be training that occurs for either boards using the system or investigators. We do have onboarding sessions, 1.5 hour virtual training sessions that we're happy to do with any folks and institutions who are interested in this. We have a lot of guides and videos and manuals, etc., that have been developed, and more will be developed as we go along. They will be in both official languages. Once the training's done, or even before that, it's important that you create your accounts in STREAM, and that will allow REBs to come in from the REB side and do their work, and the PIs and the research teams to come in from their side and do their work in terms of applications. So please contact us again if you want any help with that. This learning about the system, establishing accounts, we're really happy to do that for you. We can't establish accounts for anyone in your institution until you sign the CanReview agreement, but we're still happy to talk about the hows and provide training in the interim. So on to the next slide. Okay, so I mentioned before that there are in some provinces, there's legislative or government framework restrictions around accepting reviews, but we are looking at working with facilitated mechanisms of review, and legislative change has been happening. In Newfoundland, there's been change. In Alberta, there's been legislative change drafted. So things do change over time, and we talk to a lot of investigators, and they're really keen on us as a country, not CanReview in particular, but us as a country kind of creating those pathways so they really can participate in these mechanisms to allow single review. So that legislative change, I think some of that's being pushed by our REBs, some of it's being pushed by our investigators, et cetera. And we continue to hope it'll keep evolving. And in the interim, again, we're happy to work with institutions that have restrictions to bring them on in a way that works for them. So there's the provincial legislative or government policy. That's something we need to work with. The other thing that we found is always a point of discussion and things that organizations and sites are thinking about, especially if it's their first time using a system like this or taking advantage of an external REB, is what do you do with those external REB approvals when within your institution everything's all in one system? Your REB approvals, your research finance, your animal care, everything's in one system. So with this, there's lots of solutions to that. You can certainly, in some cases, we've seen, in the research record within the institution, the date of approval from an external REB review through another system, that date of approval is entered. We can also directly transfer data from CanReview through APIs to local systems. We've seen institutions program their systems to bypass sort of data fields that are normally required when the ethics review is done locally. And I come back to that point about your institution officials, that primary, secondary representative, they have full access and viewing rights to the REB applications, approval documents, et cetera. So there's clear intent to involve institutions so they know what's happening. Again, they have to approve the delegations, and these other sort of local system things can be worked around. So on to the next slide. So taking the next step, we come back to the recap, which is emphasizing that the next step is really signing the CanReview agreement as a recruiting site, an REB host institution, or both. Of course, any internal processes and policies, you have to take a careful look at those and make sure they would fit with this, the concept of either being a REB of record for sites outside or accepting research ethics reviews that have been done by a board external to your institution. CanReview is new, but again, come back. So many of our institutions across the country have done this already in some form or another. So this is not all brand new to them. Some it may be. If we can help in any way with that, please let us know. Of course, you have to complete that form we talked about and talk to your research community when it is in place. We find all the time, every day, we're learning of folks that are learning of things like CanReview for the very first time. So we're trying our best to communicate, but you are our strongest advocates and communicators, being out there in the institutions and working with the REBs and supportive systems around this. So for your REBs, we talked about this. Really think about going through one of the validation mechanisms. I think there's such value in either of them. And, any REBs, there's certainly, work that we know of in the qualification stream and the HRSC stream. They talk about all the benefits and the ones that they didn't necessarily expect. But the ones that they expected, the ones that went beyond that. So we really do encourage your REB, if it hasn't gone through one of these processes, to consider doing so. So on to the next slide. Other ways to help drive change. And again, you're our most important advocates out there. We love our sponsors that work with our sites across Canada, our research networks, health charities, our patient partners. If you could facilitate adoption in this, it's really important. Just communicating the message that it's out there, and that it's available, and that it really can help us to improve the research ecosystem across Canada. Studies that you have coming forward, please consider them for CanReview. And again, promoting CanReview, raising awareness would be hugely helpful to us. We're happy to do presentations, to come see what whatever you need to move this forward in your institutions. We are there to help with that. So on to the next slide, which is the last slide, where I say thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I know many of you on these calls that we're having now have been part of the development of CanReview. You've been on our cross Canada tactical teams. There's no way we'd be here without all of your support and all of your expert advice. So thank you so much for helping us to get here. And I'm really looking forward to your questions. Thank you.